bring July 14th, 2017. In the last video, we discussed drip irrigation, and we discussed precision, and we touched on nutrients a little bit. This video is going to be a secondary video. I might even produce a third, and we'll see. It might go beyond that as well. Anyway, we discussed drip irrigation. We touched on slope and how that affects drip irrigation, and we discussed precision a little bit. And so some of the things I want to cover today are an example of a lack of precision on my part, because you got to take positive out of your mistakes. I do want to pause for a second here and let you get a look at the purple coneflowers, because they are beautiful. They're just popped out yesterday and today. And tomorrow it's supposed to be sunny and clear. I imagine we'll have a ton of pollinators in here. I'll try and get out here and get some video when the pollinators come in. Anyway, back to the irrigation. This is the potato plot. Obviously I have a little bit of weeding and some more mulching to complete, but things are growing pretty well overall. I got a little behind on nutrients, and so we have a bit of a potato bug infestation here, but I did do a heavy feed last night, and I expect that will bring things back up to par and should shut these guys down pretty solid. Anyway, so there's 10 rows here. They're 100 feet long, and you can see, well, I don't know if you can see it on the camera so well. Let me see if I can get a better side view of it. Maybe you can see. Okay, so holding the camera level, I think you can see there's quite a slope change top to bottom there. That's about the max slope that I would do irrigation up and down a hill on. And honestly, if this layout of this property was a little more conducive, I probably would run across this slope rather than up and down it. But this is just how it worked out based on the area I have here. So anyway, my point is that when I charge these drip lines, I have to charge them with enough pressure that I get fairly similar amount of water on top as I do on the bottom. And that means I have to deliver quite a bit of water. If I run these a little shy, the bottom will get all the nutrition and the top won't. And so here's a perfect example of that. I did a nutrient injection, which I'll show you my nutrient injection system in a minute here, because that's something I wanted to cover. I did a nutrient injection a couple of weeks ago to direct inject some organic certified complete trace mineral and hormonal support for the plants. And when I did the injection, I didn't realize that the pump was unable to keep up with all 10 rows, because the gravity feed from the ram pump is able to keep up with all 10 rows, and it charges all 10 lines thoroughly, and we get good even distribution. But that did not happen with the nutrition when I switched over to the pump system. And you can see it here in that these potatoes are almost completely devastated leaf-wise, foliarly, by these potato bug. I think they're the larvae stage. And you can see that these didn't really grow in very well as compared to up top, say. Here's a great example right here. You can see when I charge these lines, I charge from both ends at the top, the corners, and I feed into the center. So when I charge this one with the pump, you can see where this line charged up and it filled and nutrition got delivered up top there, where things are in much better shape. And then down here, as you get down, you can see that we didn't have adequate nutrition delivered in here. And yet on the bottom of the slope, on the bottom of the line, enough pressure built up to distribute better nutrition again. Okay, and then the row next to it, which is closer to the input point, so it got fully charged, you'll notice those are much larger, much more leaf left on them, much less damage done by the bugs. All right, and remember, this isn't a pesticide, this is just a nutrient. We're basically just putting the plants up to a health point that the bugs can't beat them. But so that is a classic example of where I made a mistake, didn't realize I made a mistake until I saw the growth pattern, and consequently I lost some precision and I've lost some health, quality, and yield on some of these plants. So I did go back and do some correction in the last night. It was last night or the night before, with a real heavy foliar and drench feed, and I did not use the injection system for this time, so I could even it back out. I did it all by hand, and it takes a little longer that way. It's a little more of a pain in the butt, but I wanted to ensure everything gets stabilized. I think it will be. I think in the next week or so, this will perk back up. These bugs will probably die off, and things will be okay. Anyway, that's a good example of losing precision and what it cost you, and a good example also of not being able to supply enough water to a drip irrigation grid, and what happens when you don't charge lines completely, and how, especially if you're doing a nutrient injection, and how it doesn't get delivered to everywhere evenly, and that's really critical. You know, fortunately, we're covering enough area, and I was at a low enough dose that it didn't do damage to other plants. But if that happens on a smaller area with a higher dosage, you could potentially not deliver enough nutrition to some plants and kill others because you put too much on. So it's something to really consider when you got to do something like this. Anyway, I'll just show you real quick the injection system. First, this is the adapter. This is actually a 3/4 mile pipe thread, and they make adapters for them. I just didn't bother because I can get it to thread onto the garden hose and not leak. So I just thread right onto a garden hose, and that way I can connect between my 3/4 inch polyline plenums and the drip grids with the garden hose real easy. And that protects, the polyline doesn't take being run over by machinery or vehicles very well. But the garden hose will take that, so I use the garden hose to cross from my fittings to my irrigation points, and then I can drive back and forth across and not have to worry about damaging line. So that's a good tip for that. So anyway, this is the adapter. It goes right into a 1/2 inch barb output, and right into the drip line. And this is one of those tees. Basically, these things just push on over these tees. And so there's tees all the way across here. For each row there's a tee. See if I can dig one out on the end here for you. Yeah, there you go. See, so for each row there's a tee, and a drip line runs down. Alright, now hang on, I gotta check on the chickens. Well, when you're a chicken, the sky is always falling. Anyway, so this is a 55-gallon drum. I'm actually going to replace this with one of my blue barrels, the food grade blue barrels, because I'll be able to lay it down. I'll be able to drain it completely easier. It's more durable, a long list of reasons. But anyway, I basically use this for mixing nutrition in, and then I do injections or foliar feeds from that. This is the other part of that. It basically just fits in here. As soon as I get the wires out of the way. There we go. Okay. It's a FlowJet 4.9 gallon a minute pump. It's 12 volt DC. Draws about 14 amps under max load. Typically draws 8 to 10 amps when you're foliar feeding or whatever, unless you're up against a real hard nozzle and you're producing a lot of pressure, or you're going up a steep slope, something like that. Anyway, this is self-priming to 8 vertical feet. It's got Santoprene valves, which are basically totally corrosive resistant, and it's a diaphragm type pump, which is part of why it's able to prime up to 8 vertical feet on its own. You'll notice in front of the pump on the suction side, in front of the pump I mean prior to the water entering the pump, it is filtered. The disc filter, same disc filter that is on the ram pump. If you check out one of my more recent ram pump videos, there's one with the disc filter that explains all that. Same kind of thing. That's basically to protect this pump, because this pump is a diaphragm pump. It is not as tolerant to solid particles, so we try to keep fine particles out. This is a 150 mesh filter, and the nutrition that I use has rock dust in it, but they are all finer than 150 mesh. They're actually in a suspension. So anyway, 2 pieces to this. There are 2 valves, you'll notice, obviously. This valve is the output valve. This is normally would be shut off, and this valve would be on. You prime the system up after mixing your nutrition in here. Mix it as thoroughly as you can, and then once you get it mixed as thoroughly as you can prior to foliar feeding or injecting, you take and bring the pump on, you prime it up, and you close this valve off, and you leave this valve open, and it recirculates. And because the suction line on the intake side of this goes all the way to the bottom of the tank, you're sucking the highest concentration of the mix from the bottom of the tank, pumping it through and dumping it back on top of the tank. So you're basically inverting and flipping. And it's a great way to mix your nutrition up thoroughly before you distribute it. Again, that comes back to precision. If you don't do that, you could end up with too much nutrition on one spot and not enough on another. Anyway, this typically goes on one of my tractor carts, my trailer carts, like that. It actually usually goes in this one here, the John Deere 10 yarder, or 10 cubic footer. Anyway, so then I can pull around and foliar feed with it. Off of this is the hose fitting adapter from pipe thread to hose fitting. The hose fitting goes right on there, and I take a 50-foot garden hose, plug that on. Now I got a lead, and if I'm doing injection, it would just go right into the injection fitting that I showed you before. If I'm doing foliar feeds, it goes to the garden hose and then to a spray wand. I'll show you, I use one of 2 nozzles depending on what I'm trying to accomplish. We'll take a look at those real quick. Okay, one of 2 nozzles. I like this one for most of what I do. This is a typical, this actually came with a backpack sprayer, a pump-up backpack sprayer, which I abandoned years back because I needed more volume, more capacity, and the pump failed on that fairly quickly. I was rather disappointed for the price of that product. I think they were like $200 something. It was a pretty high-end pump. Anyway, I spared the wand from it and adapted it, and you can see I just took a pipe thread to garden hose adapter, and I just screw on to the end of the garden hose, and then I have a spray wand. This is adjustable from anywhere from fog to straight stream, and this is excellent for doing foliar feeds and that sort of thing. As crops get larger, even the corn, and especially like apple trees, blueberries, raspberries, that sort of stuff, the reality is the canopy gets very thick, and a wand like this will take you forever to soak everything if you're trying to do a good foliar feed on the leaves. Foliar feeds go on leaves, in case you're not really familiar with the term. And so that's when I get the big artillery out. This is one of those old brass garden hose nozzles, adjustable spray, and I'll just put this on the end of the hose and basically soak it like a small fire hose, and that does penetrate the leaf canopy pretty well, and it gives you enough to cover your leaf canopy thoroughly. Everything gets soaked in your foliar feed, and as it drips off, it feeds the roots as well. So that is an excellent way to do heavier canopy stuff. So I think that covers most of the drip stuff I wanted to cover for now, and I'll just let you get a shot of some of these cucumbers here. These are tasty green cucumbers, and they are delicious, nice and tender. Been having some fresh pickles lately, and just dipping them in some homemade Russian dressing. Fantastic. Anyway, I think that covers everything for drip for now, and thanks for watching the Pharmacy Seeds Network, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to like or subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching the Pharmacy Seeds Network.